I'm here to talk about hope. I'm here to talk about when people said that this country couldn't change, that it can and it has. I'm here to riff on the theme of why not here, about why no here? Why couldn't we lead the way? Why couldn't we lead the world in changing the lives of the most excluded? So, normally I talk about violence for hours on end. It is my favourite subject, but they've promised to taser me off if I go over 15 minutes. It's already counting down. So, I'm going to give you a flavour of where we've come from in Scotland. And can I tell you, we should be proud. We're at a 40-year low, but we're not done yet. No complacency. I never want to have to meet another parent who's lost their kid through murder. I can't explain to you what that feels like, even just listening to the story. I never want to meet another kid in jail or a kid who's in care who starts a story or a narrative to me with the phrase, see when I was 8, see when I was 6, see when I was 10. Because the violence that they experience in their early life stays with them forever. And the best that we can hope is we can make it better and not worse. I cannot undo the violence that's been done to them in early years. So, I'm going to give you a flavour of where we are, and it's a bit depressing at the beginning. I just want to tell you that, but it gets better. Proceed until apprehended. That's my motto for the year, or proceed until tasered, as it could be later on. Sometimes you just need to go forward relentlessly. Sometimes you don't even know the direction you're going in, because I can't take anything off the shelf to try and solve this. I need to invent it sometimes, and that means that I have failed spectacularly at things. But if you're going to do it, you might as well fail big. Back in 2004, in the bad old days, the United Nations Peace Monitor came out, and what it said was, Scotland was the most violent country in Europe, and Glasgow was the most violent city. Now, you can imagine, Visit Scotland, we're delighted. It was, come to Scotland, get chibbed. It's really, I quite like to put Colombia up here, because it makes us look good. But here's the thing, when you're presented with statistics, you can do two things. You can either complain that all these other countries aren't recording right, or you can embrace the zeitgeist. Anybody in here think that Scotland didn't have a problem with violence? It did. So sometimes you just need to say, we are Scotland and we have a problem. And we have to do something. In fact, you know something? We have to do anything to make it better. And we did. Yet we've got a strange history, haven't we? We quite like it. When you talk about violence, every psychopath on the television is Scottish. Have you noticed that? That's my next one. You know, but we've got a great history. Hume, Adam Smith. We seemingly have been involved in quite a lot of battles. But recently, Scotland has been portrayed by this. And can I tell you that's not a good thing? The violent, angry man. Well, can I tell you that's not the Scotland I love? That's not the Scotland I want to be proud of. I want to be proud of something very different. And so you have to change it. And we seem to think we've invented violence, don't we? Yeah, I mean, you'd certainly think if you read the Daily Mail that Scotland had invented violence. I'd just like to tell you they haven't. Look at this. What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders, they disobey their parents, they ignore the law. They riot in the streets. The second bit, as for girls, they are forward and modest and unladylike in speech. Peter the Hermit in the 13th century. Go, Peter. I've got a 14-year-old, that's so true. It's been around for a very long time. The truth is, you teach your kids not to be violent. That's why you teach them not to hit. You can design this out. And it's easy if you really put your mind to it. If you find enough positive architects in life that want to go in the same direction. And that's what we have. I'm a great stalker of people, you know. I like to think I'm just a friend that you don't know yet, you know. I stalk people that can do things for people. Honestly, I like to make friends. I don't have partnership. I have friends. I have friends that do things to try and make this country better. And yet the thing is, the complexity overwhelms us. It's easy to define the problem. I could stay here all day talking about violence, and you'd probably be quite interested. And then somebody would say, right, and now what? And the problem is when I'm going to speak to people, they say, oh, God, it's so complex. And it so is about, where do you start? Who cares? Start someplace. Nobody's going to look back in 12 years' time and think, look where that idiot started. They'd look back and say, you knew what the problem was and you didn't start anywhere. So we started. And my colleague and I went to see someone very senior who I shan't mention. And we said, we want to do violence reduction. This was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And he said, it's too big, don't bother. And he gave us a cup of tea and a biscuit. And I never went back to see him. If you're going to try and change something, you can do three things. You can lead, you can follow, or you can get out the way. That's your choices. And we decided that that's what we wanted to do. So I want you to shut your eyes. And I want you to now imagine that Scotland's at the very top of that list. That it is the least violent country. That women are no longer victimised in their own homes. That young men don't grow up to join gangs. That we're no longer building prisons for 15 years hence, because that would be like admitting that we're going to fail the kids who are in primary 1 today. That sounds pretty good to me. Are you with me? Say aye. Aye. That's where you are. So, but what do? We decided we'd change the framework. Because for so often, we've looked at criminal justice, haven't we? Criminal justice will solve this. We'll wait until you report a crime, and then we'll record it, and then we'll investigate it, and then, obviously, with the police force, you will get somebody and they'll be detected and they'll go to jail. But we didn't. We changed the paradigm. We had a paradigm shift, and we changed violence to disease. Scotland is the only country where violence is a stated public health issue, just like measles, just like TB. And so we started to talk about how people caught it. Who was at risk? What could you do to try and target it, inoculate? If anybody's got an inoculation, I'd quite like it, thank you. And then what we did, we try and scale it up. And this is what World Health Organizations say you should do. If you're going to try and target a disease, interrupt transmission. Change behaviour and change the norms. The reason that you have to change the norms is, one of the things that really started me off on this was because many, many years ago I saw a story of a young man who was 16 who'd been stabbed and he bled to death in a gutter. And this elderly woman had come out and she'd cuddled him whilst he died, crying for his mum and saying, please don't let me die. And honestly, whilst I have got a hard exterior, it moved me to tears. And I thought, this is it. This is a Rosa Parks moment when people stand up and say, we've had enough. And nothing happened. So I went out and I spoke to people in the community and I said, what's that about? And somebody said to me, he was all he was ever going to be at the age of 16. Well, sometimes you need to lead. And we've decided to do something different. So I'm going to give you a big flavour of some of the stuff that we've been doing in violence reduction. I'm going to talk to you about the very top end, about dealing with people who are already very affected. Some of you will feel some sympathy, some of you won't. The challenge is that kids follow their parents. Now, lots of you would like to think that I can solve violence by just building more prisons and putting loads of people in jail. Can I tell you, if that worked, America would have no crime. Because they jail 3.5 million people a year. You need to do something very different. I know in my heart of hearts that the solution to this is about parenting in early years, about equipping children with the skills to get through life, communication, empathy, problem solving, team working, all the skills that you have. They help you get through life without bumping into alcohol or drugs or violence. The Swedish Children's Commissioner once said to me, she said, you have many dandelion children. And I said to her, what's a dandelion child? And she says, these are the dandelions that grow up between the cracks. She says, these are the kids who survive and thrive despite the worst of circumstances. And they survive and thrive because usually a good male role model takes an interest in them. A teacher, a significant other. Because I've got a whole group of young men who are grown up in 21st century Scotland without any idea about what it is to be a man. I'm a strident feminist, but I do realise you guys are quite important. I have no idea what it's like to be a 16-year-old boy, but it's really important to know what it's like to be a man. So we started to do some gang intervention. I don't always work with people you think are really lovable. Sometimes they make themselves really difficult to even like. But I decided I would try and do something big. Because when I ask them, why is it you're in a gang? They say, because without a gang, I'm nothing. They have nothing else in their life. These guys don't lack any information about death or prison or injury. They already know that. Their family trees are absolutely littered with people who've died young or have been killed or are in jail. Choices in this life are not created equally. Let's not kid ourselves that they are. So we decided to do a big gang intervention. So I said to our chief constable, who was delighted, I'd like to get all these gang members in. There was 3,500 of them. I'd like to get as many as possible. We're going to get them in a courtroom and we're going to tell them to stop. He said, please tell me it's more complex than that. I said, so is, sir, so is. And he said, do you think you can do it? As I had my fingers crossed behind my back, I said, yes, absolutely. He said, do you have a map? I said, no, but I've got a compass point. I know where I'm going. So we got them all in the room. And the chief stood up and we flashed our pictures around the wall and we said, we know who you are, I know where you live. We could come and get you if we want to. But can I tell you, the violence has to stop. I don't want to go to your house and tell your mum that you've just been killed or we've just arrested you for murder. I want you to stop. And you could see them as they're looking at their pictures around the room. Their chests are out, and it's the police and they're like, come ahead. Come ahead. And then we got a mum stood up. And her name was Joyce Young. Joyce lost her son to murder. She's a midwife. She's a spectacular woman. And she stood up and she said, you boys might not care about yourself, but let me tell you what happened to my son. Because she held him as he died. She's now going to his room every single day. And I'll never get over it. The Scots aren't known for their in-touchness with their feelings. But can I tell you, you could hear the guys crying in the back of the courtroom. Because no matter how awful sometimes their families are, they love their mum. Their mum is the only person who will come and visit them in prison. And that's really difficult. And it's normally only about 8 days before somebody else goes out with their girlfriend. May. That's just the way it is. And then we had a consultant surgeon who stood up and he said, I fix babies' cleft palates. He said, I've now got a waiting list because you boys are causing the most horrific facial injury. In Glasgow, we have a serious facial injury every 6 hours, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You will suffer 60 years' worth of deprivation if you have that in your face. And they couldn't even look at the injuries. And then we said, but you've got a choice. Phone this number 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had somebody out to them within 24 hours. We had a plan for them by the end of the week. And behind that one number, for anybody who's in public service, this is a tricky bit, was health, education, housing, everybody that could get them out of violence. Now, it's really interesting. I didn't think we'd get anybody. We got hundreds and hundreds. And when I spoke to Harry Burns, who's the chief medical officer, Harry said, what you were doing is you were giving people a choice. Because for most of the people I work with, they've got no choice about who they're born to, who their parents are, what school they go to, even what gang they're going into. For the first time in their lives, I gave them a choice. And they took it. And we've had some extraordinary transformations. Gang fighting is the exception and not the rule now. I spent a weekend hanging around the A&E department at Glasgow Royal Infirmary. I normally lurk at the bottom of the bed waiting for someone to come in with a stab wound and saying, this isn't working out too well for you here, big man. Maybe you want to think about changing. You can imagine I'm really well, they're really desperate to see me. But you have to do something. Because actually what the guys are saying now in Glasgow Royal Infirmary is they don't see very many stab wounds. The lead consultant then said to me, he said, Karyn, am I sounding boring that I'm not getting that many stab wounds in? I said, oh my goodness, I love you, It is changed fundamentally. But the best way to stop a gun or a gang or a knife is a job. At the Commonwealth Games last year, I had a game of brinksmanship with a whole range of people and I had some great supporters in Scottish Government who gave me some money. I took 30-odd people, hardcore, off the dole. Actually, we're not a very attractive-looking bunch. I should have showed you the after picture. I advertised in Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, homeless shelters, prisons. I said, come and join us. Come and be part of something different. I took them off the dole. One of the women who came to us had been in drugs for 15 years and had just got herself clean. She'd been in prostitution. And I asked her that old interview staple, tell me, why should we take you? And she said, oh, I wouldn't take me, so we did. I had a young guy who walked 5 miles on his birthday to get to us by 10 a.m. in the morning, and we took him too. And we were a motley crew, and we did everything. And they absolutely excelled at the Commonwealth Games. All the water that you saw you were on the streets was my team that did it. Can I tell you now that 80% of them are in full-time jobs, and none of them had ever had a job in their life. And can I tell you why it's important? Because between them, they had 100 children between them. And I need their kids to see their dads and their mums going out to work. I need to see something different. I'm now at 4, 3, 2, 1. So, I want to say to you, I'm going to take my minutes. You need a focus test, because this is difficult. I need you to ask yourself who you are. If you find this a tough thing to do, can you ask yourself what is it you do and why it matters? Because it really does. Because we're in a journey. We could lead the world in reducing violence. We could be the safest country in the world. And can I tell you, I think that's worth aspiring to. John Cleese said, "It's not the despair I can stand the despair. It's a hope I can't bear." Well, can I tell you, I think we could all do with a little hope. Thanks very much.